Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Onfleet webinar today. We're going to get started in just 30 seconds here, but just wanted to welcome everyone and really excited about the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So we'll get started in about 30 seconds. Come on in. We have a lot to share, and it's going to be really great. All right, welcome to Onfleet's webinar with Philip Gomez, co-owner of Patty's Cakes. My name is Mary Lee, Director of Customer Success at Onfleet. We're excited to share best practices around Onfleet, Zapier, and Airtable today. We will have a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to a great session. So Philip is co-owner, head nerd, and general manager at Patty's Cakes and Desserts. His mother, Patty, started the business out of the house in 1985. Philip joined her when they moved to a storefront in 2010. Using his tech background and problem-solving attitude, he has created an innovative operation leaning on today's technologies to keep the business running smoothly and efficient. When not working, he's an avid gravel and road cyclist. Philip also had a successful exit for his previous marketing company, and it's my pleasure to introduce him to you and to have Philip share how he uses his tech stack to run his delivery operations. Philip, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. Yes, I'm the head nerd over here, and I'm going to hopefully walk you through some things that are going to be very helpful to you and your business. So to jump in, what Mary talked about, so, we're Patty's Cakes. We're based in Fullerton, California. We're ultimately a local cakery. We do small deliveries. We do large events. We have two vans that we work with that do all of our deliveries. And ultimately, we have 4 delivery windows, 10 to 1, 12 to 3, 2 to 5, and 4 to 7. So that's kind of the nutshell of what we do in relation to how we interact with Onfleet. And how we are situated. So today's objective, though, ultimately is to share unique and useful tools to make your business useful and more and easier to run. I know with today's technologies and with Onfleet and whatnot, there's just ultimately a lot of things going on in your business. There's a lot of things that need to get moved around. And there's a lot of things that are being presented to you, but yet how do you organize those in an effective way? And that's ultimately what we're going to talk about today, which I'm excited to show you. And if I go too far in the weeds on this, we got a question and answer at the end. I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Ultimately, our agenda today is we're going to talk about integrations. We're going to talk about our daily delivery flow, as well as our routing tricks. So let's jump in on this. So first of all, integrations. So Zapier and Airtable are the 2 things we're going to talk about today. Ultimately, Zapier, if you haven't heard about them, I highly recommend you read up on them, dive in. We're going to cover quite a bit today. In simple terms, you can read on the screen how Zapier describes them, but ultimately, think of Zapier as like your Google Translate. No matter what language comes in, you can send another language out, and you can bring it back into Google Translate and go back out again. So it doesn't matter what language you're talking about, as long as it's in Google Translate, you can go in, go out, move things around. It's extremely useful to do so. So you can have one app integration go through Zapier, and then it ends up going to another app and then bounces back. I can't, it's hard to wrap my head around how to describe this until you really sink your teeth in and use it. But ultimately, Google Translate was the best example that I can give you to allow all your technology, all your tech stack, all your different applications to talk to each other and move things around with you automatically instead of manually. To give you an idea, I have 225 Zaps, actually over 225 Zaps, that I use every day throughout my business to make things automated. It's finally automation within everybody's reach, which is, like you don't have to be a techie to do this. Everything they're kind of championing the no code movement, where you can do a lot of these things without knowing how to code. It's just drag and drop, super easy to use. You just have to understand the logic of things. So it's highly recommended. And to give you an idea, Zapier and Onfleet, since we're here for Onfleet today, to give you an idea of how I use this, when a new order comes in through Shopify, I use Zapier to go through and validate for a new phone number, to validate for a valid address, to adjust the service base time based off of if it's a single story or it's a high rise, and then gather any errors that I have in those customers, in those issues, and then send them right to my customers. So in other words, if somebody sends me a phone number that's incorrect, I don't want my drivers to get to the destination and then realize, oh, we got a bad phone number. Or they get to an address and it's like, wait a second, this address doesn't exist. Like there is no address on this street that's valid, right? And so instead of the driver getting that situation where we really can't do anything about it, maybe we can't get in the hold of the customer immediately, we want to take care of all that stuff ahead of time. So when the driver's out on the road, there's no bumps, there's no issues. They complete their delivery swiftly and as expected. So that way we can keep on our flow without any of those hiccups. So those are just a nutshell idea of how we use Zapier with Onfleet to make sure that we are processing everything properly. With Airtable, if you haven't heard of Airtable, it's like Excel is the best way that I can say to get your mind around what it does. However, if you think of Excel's like it's like a picture, it's like a 1D picture, right? It's just up on your wall, and it's great. It looks great. However, Airtable is like a 3D picture that you can interact with because it brings in that Excel grid that you can see your data from. It brings in a database so that way you can manipulate your data and live data can come in and out of it. And then as well as it's kind of like a website where you can customize things and you can move things around and put things in the places that you like them to be. So that way, instead of just that 1D picture in front of you, you actually have this like 3D thing that you can interact with and move around with and adjust. It's unbelievably helpful. I personally used to use Excel like crazy, and now I do like 10% of things in Excel and 90% of my stuff is in Airtable, because every time I'm in Excel now, I'm like, oh, but I could do that so much better in Airtable. Or if I had this, I could do this. So now I just kind of leave Excel behind and move everything over to Airtable. It's just so much easier to use. Airtable also does many, many things. So we're going to talk about how it interacts with Airtable today and how we use it for logistics management. But ultimately, you can create whatever you like with it, whether it be a CRM, or a product roadmap. Like we use it to like do all of our products. All of our recipes. We're able to like do our recipes from like the actual ingredient level to like the sub ingredient to the last to the final product, and all that stuff rolls up to each other. So it can get really nerd like that and depth, or it can be very simple, like event planning or a Gantt chart, or we use it for employee management. I have all my employees in there. And in fact, Airtable has automations to where like 30 days into an employee joining our team, once they hit that mark, Airtable will send me an email saying, hey, that person's been here for 30 days. Reach out to the HR department and have them on board for their health insurance. So I don't have to keep track of that anywhere else. I just let Airtable do the heavy lifting for me once I've set up that simple automation. So there's so many things that Airtable can do. So if you're curious about all that, highly recommend you take a look at them. And we're obviously going to cover a lot of those details today. Ultimately, here's an idea of where Airtable looks like. Again, it's kind of like Excel, but yet there's so much under the hood on that. So we'll cover a little bit about that today. Let's keep rolling. So our daily delivery flow, just to kind of give you an idea, this is how we do things. This is how we dispatch. This is how we do routing. This is how we do fulfillment, right? So that way you kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from and how we make our lives so much easier every day. So to give you an idea, fundamentals, right? So like we mentioned earlier, we have 4 delivery windows. We have 10 to 1, 12 to 3, 2 to 5, 4 to 7. And a big pro tip on this is that 1 hour overlap that you see is a huge help to creating efficient routes. The reason I say this is if you've ever had a delivery that's across the street or maybe like 2 blocks down the street, if your windows don't overlap, what happens is, say it's 10 to 12 and 12 to 3, right? Well, if you want to go, if there's one delivery across the street and it's 10 to 12 and the next delivery is 12 to 3, you have to get that driver to that area right at the 12 o'clock window. And that's really hard to do. It's super inefficient to try to, especially if you have multiple overlaps or multiple of those situations, it just doesn't work. So by overlapping them by an hour, it changed everything about what we do and make things very easy, or a lot easier to put all these together. So that 1 hour overlap has been super helpful. To give you an idea, for our company vans, we use phones assigned to them in Onfleets, say PC1, PC2. To give you an idea, if you're familiar with Onfleet, right, typically you have somebody, the driver has the phone and then they're assigned to their car. They drive their own car. However, because we don't have personal vehicles and they use company vehicles, those phones just live in those vans, regardless of what driver is in them. Also for dispatch, our dispatch is done in the office by myself or one of my drivers, and fulfillment is done in the kitchen by a completely different group. So ultimately, the problem was the fulfillment crew was confused, right? So like, which order went in what vehicle? What time were they leaving? With what driver? Was the order done? Was it waiting to be done? Did we grab all the orders for that van, or did we just have some of the orders? What about the order that just came in, and that new one, and that next one, right? There's some days when orders just pour in after a while, right? As everybody kind of wakes up, gets their coffee, and starts assigning, starts placing orders. We need to be able to handle all of that. So Onfleet is fantastic. However, we were kind of having some issues with that. So the solution that we came up with using Airtable, right? Because at once we were just simply printing out what we had in Onfleet and running it over to the fulfillment team, but that was instantly out of date as soon as a new delivery came in, or maybe something got delayed, and so we had to update things. So moving to Airtable ultimately provided a visual interface for the fulfillment team to interact with, as well as the dispatch team. So we can instantly sync what's happening in what's happening in Onfleet with what's happening in Airtable, right? So both screens can be synced up, and we can ultimately use it in the office, and it will show up over there in the fulfillment team. And ultimately, it's endlessly customizable. So if there was something that we just didn't like, I didn't have to pay the developer to go make a bunch of changes. We just moved things around in Airtable and instantly changed on all screens. So we have, this is kind of an idea of what we do. So this is our dispatcher view. It's slightly different than what would be our fulfillment view, which has a slightly different layout. They're taller rows, so the fulfillment team can see things a little clearer. It's grouped by time, so you can see that there is, it's highlighted there that there's groupings of 10:45 and 11 a.m. That's just a natural part of Airtable. Grouping is a very, very useful tool that they offer. And then we're going to subgroup this by driver. So you can see here we have PC1 and PC2 down below. And so now we can instantly see by this natural feature of Airtable of how these things are grouped together. A couple more details here is we can communicate instructions. So as we're creating these routes and these delivery rounds in Airtable, in Onfleet, we can then communicate to the fulfillment team whether or not this driver needs to leave right away, or maybe they need to leave after their lunch, or maybe they need to leave ASAP because we're really tight on time when they get back. So those are super helpful. We also have these check boxes over here. So the fulfillment team can check whether or not the order is completed, right? And if it's completed, is it loaded in the cart and ready to go for that driver? So it's one thing to say, hey, we have all these deliveries, but maybe they're in the fridge or they're kind of spread out in our prepping areas, and they're not actually loaded on the cart, right? To us, that cart is what's going to be pulled into the van and get unloaded. So we want to make sure that they have everything when they're on their way over there. And sometimes we have so many deliveries that are so close together, we don't have enough carts for everything. So we will stage some of the other items, say, in a different area while the carts are getting loaded. And then we'll get those out as needed one at a time. So we can use these check marks right here on the screen of whether or not they're completed or not, or whether or not they're on the cart. which is also very helpful is, say, down the road in the middle of the day, the routes completely change because of the way the new routing is happening, and we have deliveries in more the west side of town than the east side of town. Well, all we do is go through an update, and those check marks will follow the order no matter where it is in the day. So that way you're not writing on a different note somewhere else, and it's not tied to the information. Everything's in one place, on one screen, that's always going to stay up to date. So it's very, very helpful for us. As well as you can see the order items. So you can see they're listed. There's a preview of the items. If you click on those boxes, it'll enlarge, and you can see all the items in the order as well. And to give you an idea, this is how our screen works. Pretty basic. Here, we've got the touch screen. It's like a Dell 22-inch touchscreen monitor hooked up to just a simple PC behind it. Around there, we've got our, the normal things you need for fulfillment. You've got tape and stickers and stapler and all that kind of stuff, all there in one place so that they can manage all the fulfillment of the items right there. So let's ultimately see that in action, because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's a whole other thing to actually see it work. So let's get this loaded up. So I've got a dummy day here with a bunch of different tasks. So we're going to take these tasks. I'm going to grab these first few, and I'm going to drag these down and assign them to, come on screen, run out of real estate here. Hold on, let's try that again. There we go. All right, so our current drivers are out on the road right now, so I'm going to load this up onto a staging car, and I'm going to grab the rest of these and drag these into the next one. I'm going to flip on over here to Airtable. That's today's route. My driver's dispatcher's working on that. All right, so we got this loaded up here, and we're going to let Zapier do its thing as everything starts to flip over. Give it a second. There it is. All right, so you can see everything. I'm going to scroll down here, and you can watch all of those things now change over. So it's assigning the driver in Airtable. So we used to have all of these that were unassigned, and now the whole day is now assigned. So all the drivers have synced over. This is obviously your test people, but if we have all the different names of all the different customers, they would be listed here. So that's step one, right? It's automatically going to sync. Now the second part of that is we're going to need to assign these to drivers. So we've got two drivers here. We've got Tim, or Timmy as we like to call him around here, and we've got Oscar. These are one of our other main drivers. So I'm just going to assign them. I know that Oscar's going to be in PC1 today, and or stage, we'll call it stage 2 today, and then we've got stage 1 is going to be Tim, or Timmy. So now I've got them all assigned. Now I go through and compare to what I have in Onfleet of what I know these drivers need to leave. So maybe this round, Tim needs to leave on these three tasks at 9 a.m. He's going to come back, and at 12 o'clock he's going to leave again at a later time. And then maybe Oscar, he needs to leave at 10 a.m. for these. And then maybe he's going to end up coming back, and at, let's say, 1 o'clock, he's going to take these. And then he's going to come back for that last window, and maybe he's going to leave at 4 o'clock for these. So now instead of just having this big, long list over here in Airtable, right, where we have, here's everything that we need for the day, and here's everything we need for the next part of the day. Instead of being, that's great, but fulfillment doesn't actually know what time is where or what the routing is. When you go to Airtable, now you can see these simple sections, right? This is the 9 a.m. with this driver, this is the 10 a.m. with that driver, and this is the next windows, right? So it lists everything there, nice and easy. They have those check marks where they can interact with over here. So they can mark those as needed. And like I said, they can communicate. So maybe for Tim, typically the first route of the day, I always need to leave on time. And maybe this next one, he needs to leave after his lunch. Maybe this one is super tight, so he needs to get in here. We need to hustle and make sure that he leaves ASAP. And maybe this next one is, let's see here, just leave when they return. So you're able to just simply communicate however that goes and however you need to your business. Everything is completely customizable in Airtable. You just simply click on the field, customize it, and then you can adjust as needed. So very easy. It's all no coding. It's just simply changing things how you like it to be. So let's keep moving. So pretty cool, right? I mean, when I first figured this out, I probably looked just like old Kiana right here. It really blew my mind of how I could just sync this together, communicate, and everything stays in sync. So let's dive into how that works. So ultimately, a new order comes into Shopify. From Shopify, it's processes through Zapier, and then it heads over. We drop that information into Onfleet, and then we also drop it into Airtable, so that way we can get some of the information in the right places. Once we've done that, then ultimately it's just going to sync between Onfleet and Airtable through Zapier, right? So essentially, every time we assign a driver, it runs through Zapier and processes, and then the changes are reflected down in Airtable, as we saw, as everything danced around. So ultimately, Zapier equals magic, right? So Zapier is doing all the magic behind the scenes. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no coding needed. It does boil down to 4 simple tasks, 4 things that you need to do. There's definitely some steps involved that we're going to talk about. But ultimately, there's a task updated and driver assigned. There's a task cloned and a task deleted, as well as a driver unassigned. Those are the 4 zaps that we need to create. So I'm going to go over those with you right now. So here are those 4 zaps. We have the task updated and driver assigned. So if you've never used Zapier, this is ultimately what a task looks like. Essentially, from top to bottom, you have the very first step is what they call as a trigger. That's what's going to get things moving, right? So you need that trigger, and then everything after that is actions. So you can stack things on top of each other. So in this situation, we catch the trigger, which is called a webhook. Webhook sounds like a very techie thing to say. You may not have ever heard of one. All it is simply it's a little link that can be simple or have a little bit of information or a lot of information behind it, and it simply just transmits information from one place to another place. It's as simple as a URL, to keep this on the simple side. So we catch that webhook with information, and then we just go through and do all these different steps. So there's things that we have to catch some information. We have to split the task up. We have to find the order details. We get the name of those details. We're just basically manipulating data as we go all the way down the step, and then moving things around as needed. And we can put some logic in there as well if we need things to start or stop, things like that. So the task cloned. So same thing. We start with a trigger, and then we simply follow through with a bunch of different actions. The task deleted, same thing. This one's a little simpler. We catch the webhook. We go find it in Airtable. We delay it to make sure that everything settles a little bit, and then we update it again. So again, it's logic. Just kind of, you're just telling Zapier what things need to get done. And then lastly, the driver unassigned. So we're going to simply catch that webhook, go through these simple steps, and now you've unassigned the driver. So the reason for these 4 things is ultimately to keep Airtable mimicking what's happening in Onfleet. It's really all it is. All we've done is create this proper steps to make sure that everything is synced up. It's something that I've refined over many months of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And ultimately, this is what I figured out that works. Now, I will say that underneath those, we'll show a little bit later, there is multiple things that need to get done within each one of those steps. Unfortunately, I can't go frame by frame with you on all of those things, but just know there is a little bit more to this than what you see. But that's the outline of what we have going on. Let's talk about the next fun thing, which really everybody can apply. It's a little easier than, say, what we've just covered, but very, very useful tools. Daily route hacks, or tricks, I should say. So ultimately, this is how our driver flow works. We route all of our drivers with one flow for the day. From start to end, we waterfall the timeline. That way we can make sure that everything is going to be on time throughout the entire day. The reason I say that is, if we used to break things up and say, okay, well, this is our first route, and then this is our second route, but yet it really wouldn't work that way, because we realized that if we don't flow everything, we don't know if we're actually going to be on time after lunch or in those later routes. So to us, we figured out a way to just put everything together in a water flow, and this is how we do it. So ultimately, we create a task let's call it a starter. From that starter, it's just preset data that we're going to cover in a second, and we can assign that a time. So as you guys know in Onfleet, your very first task for the day, Onfleet assumes that you will get to that task at the very start of it. So say it's a 10 to 1 task. Well, it assumes you're going to complete that task at 10 a.m. But that's not always the case. I mean, most times to us, we're leaving maybe at 10:30 because we've got this big window of time. So, or in this case, as we show here, 11 a.m., right? So we want Onfleet to know, hey, we're actually not going to get in the car until 11 a.m. So that's when we need to actually start. So that's set to our address. And then the driver we'd add those additional tasks. So here's 3 tasks that are going to get us completed to at 1:23. And then we're going to put in a new task called a return. So that return is going to take us from that last task and bring us all the way back to our location. Reason being is, again, if Onfleet's going to think that you ended that task at 1:23, and if you put another task after that, it's going to say, great, well, we're going to go from this point to this next point with nothing in between. But we need to come back to the store. We need to reload. We may need to take a lunch break and then go back to that next task. So the return helps us negotiate and then figure out the time that we need. So in this case, it's going to take 37 minutes to get from that last task back to our store. We also need this driver to take a lunch. So 30 minutes of that is going to take care of their lunch. And then after that lunch is when we can actually start the next tasks. So here we go. We're going to do 3 more tasks. And so now we know from the very beginning of the day that when we put that starter in and we start driving at 11 a.m., that the very last task will be done at 4:03. So that way there's no things down the road where we're like, oh man, we totally miscalculated this route and we're going to be late for these last 5 deliveries, or we should have gone a different route, or should have balanced our routes a little different. We know from the very beginning, before we start the day, that everything is going to make sense. So these have been super, super helpful for us. And I'm going to cover a little bit more about how these are created so you can use them yourselves. Ultimately, we create these in Zapier, right? We create just a preset task in Zapier that every time we click on it, basically we click on a webhook URL, it's going to create that task for today, so that way it will show up. The same thing happens for a return task. The same thing, it's going to be a preset task that's going to be set with the configuration that you can see on the screen. It's also going to include 10 minutes in a service time to load up the vehicle, so we have that buffer of time. And then we just simply click on a URL and it loads in. I'm going to show you how that works in just a second. Last thing is a lunch task. Same thing. It's just another task that's set for 30 minutes, so that way we can make sure that the drivers have a 30-minute time gap while they lunch, and we can keep everything on time. So to give you an idea of how that works, I'm going to just demo that for you right here. So I'm going to go over to this task. We can see in our day, we've got all of these different tasks earlier, but I need to really break these up because these are just one big flow that doesn't quite help us make sense of this. So I'm going to go to my browser window here. I'm going to go to a new browser, and I've got these set up. I'm going to cover this in a second here. So in 4 days, I'm going to actually just load all of these. I need a starter, a lunch, and a return. I'm going to do that one more time because I have 2 drivers. I'm going to load all of these. I'm going to flip over here to Onfleet and check out this magic. All I had to do was click on those URLs. That's it. And next thing you know, all of these loaded. So now I have tasks that were 1 click away. And now I can say, all right, for this guy, I'm going to drop him into here. So that's my starter for the day. But actually, we're going to start this day at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to drop that in at 11. And then I'm going to, he's going to do a couple deliveries, and then I'm going to have him return to the store. And then I'm going to have him give a lunch break. And then now I get a better idea. So this is my start. Here's those 3 that he needs to go do. He's going to come back to the store. He's going to have a lunch break, and then he's going to go back out and complete these. So as Onfleet's going to update, we got a 10:30 starts, and now these times may not update properly because it's really all the same address. But you can see all these things are waterfalling. Yeah, so we're out of date on these things. But you can see that the time now, we're going to start at 11:30. We know he's going to be completed at 1:21 with knowing that he's going to drive back and he's going to have this 30-minute lunch. So that's it in action. Again, it's just kind of a dummy task because we're all going to the same location here, some random 1, 2, 3 address that I found nearby. But ultimately, that allows us to make this all very easy. Again, we do the same thing. We grab these and assign them to the next driver and say, if we've got multiple drivers for the day, we just keep stacking these and organizing all of our routes so everything makes sense. So hopefully those things make a lot of sense to you, and it's something that you can use today. Let's talk about how to make those. So again, it's very straightforward here. Your trigger is going to be a webhook. So here's an example of what a webhook looks like from Zapier. It's just a URL with some data and then some more data, right? It's just a unique identifier to essentially your account and your particular Zap. That's all dummy information for you. Now over here, this is what an actual Zapier task looks like. So these are some of the configuration things that you need to do. You just simply need to assign your merchant account. It's like what account you have, what type of task is it. It's all these simple things that you need to plug in that are just required to create a task. So you just go through one by one, fill out what your address to be. In this case, I just need it to be back to our address here in Fullerton. I just give our own phone number in there, and I create a label for it. So pretty straightforward things with that. You just fill it out. And now all you do is save this webhook, as you saw me do in my Chrome, right, in your web browser. And as soon as you click on that, it basically goes to Zapier, triggers this, and then pulls down into Onfleet, and bingo, there you go. You got an instant task to use. Now, a little bit of an advanced feature on there is I actually add a little bit of an ID to the end of it. Now, I will say this is advanced. However, it's not the hardest thing to do. Question mark ID equals is how a URL works. It's called the query string here. And so I'm calling this as a variable, and I'm going to get a number on the end of this. So today plus 0 equals today, and today plus 1 equals tomorrow, and today plus 2 ultimately equals the day after tomorrow. So what I'm saying here is Zapier is going to give me today's date, and I'm going to take today's date plus this query string ID, this number right here, right? And I'm going to take basically this plus this, and it's a day. And so at the end of that query string, that's how you saw me have all these different options here. So that's how I'm able to say, hey, today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 3 days from now, or 4 days from now, right? And so that way, ultimately, I can adjust what you see here. And maybe on Wednesday, I've already got a full day. So I'm going to go, and I need to make sure that my Saturday is not overloaded or isn't organized. So I want to start working on that stuff ahead of time. Well, I just send those tasks over there to Saturday. If I know it's 3 days ahead or 4 days ahead, I'll send them over there, and boop, they all show up instantly. So there's nothing manual that I have to do other than, say, adjusting the start time for the day. Another pro tip with these is these are fantastic for repetitive tasks. So like car wash or regular customers, supply shops, vehicle maintenance, lunch spots, right? Like just today, our vans are filthy. So I've got a couple different car washes throughout the county that I know are good. And so if my driver's on the west side of town, I'll grab that car wash and I'll grab the link and set it to the route so he knows that when he's done with that route on that side of town, he'll go through the car wash and come back. The guy just happened to be on the other driver was on the west side of town today, so I have a car wash over there, so I'll send him to that car wash. So that way, on his way back, car gets washed. We also have other suppliers that we frequent often, so I have those loaded up, so I can instantly just click the link and bingo. Now I know I can send them to the supplier without having to go Google the address and fill in the task and tell them what to do. Hey, go to will call and then do this and then do this. Like I just do it once, and then I just click a link every time after that. Takes a little bit of time to set up, but it makes life so much easier down the road. And that's ultimately the power of Zapier and how it makes Onfleet so much more powerful and easier when you combine those two things together. So moving on up, there it is. So thank you so much. I got all that out. Hopefully I didn't blow it too far over your head, but we can definitely answer any questions that you have. I'll turn it over to Mary here. I believe we have some more, another Onfleet webinar coming up that she can talk about. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Philip. That was chock full of information. Stay behind to ask questions. You can ask him directly during the Q&A. So you can go ahead and put your questions right now if you have any in the Q&A. I'm sure there's a few folks who do have that. But next, our next webinar is Wednesday, November 2nd at 10 a.m. Pacific. Ben Whittle from Toolbox will tell us how he uses Onfleet metadata to automate operations and even invoicing. So join us. You can register onfleet.com/webinars. Join us there, and we look forward to another a webinar with chock full of information and helpful tips. All right. There's a couple of questions here, Philip.
All right.
One thing is 225 Zaps. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what else you do with Zapier, Airtable, Onfleet? What else do you do?
Yeah, totally. I even made myself some cheat sheets here because I have so many of them that I can't even forget what those are, and I had an idea you were going to ask these. So, like some of those things that I do in Zapier are like CRM syncs. Like we use Zendesk Sell, so we sync information from Zendesk Sell into Airtable, so that way we can manipulate better. I can't ask Zendesk Sell to build me custom reports, but I can get them in Airtable, and then I can do whatever I like to them, right? And so it's a very simple solution for us. All the web forms that we have on our website, they come over through Zapier. Onfleet's sync, like we talked about. Onfleet emails, so when we're emailing people, the buyers of when their deliveries are going out, we have those all through Zapier. With e-sign situations, QuickBooks integrations. We talked about earlier about how I sync and I validate phone numbers and addresses in through Zapier before we throw them into Onfleet. You asked about Airtable, correct, as well?
Yeah.
So yeah, with Airtable, we compile a lot of our customer reviews in there. I do all my employee management is in there. Inventory, we have like 800 items that need to be in stock at all times from a dozen different suppliers. I could not find a software out there that could really manage that for me that wasn't ridiculously expensive or just it wasn't what I needed. But that's the beauty of Airtable. Like I was able to create exactly what I wanted in the format that I wanted, and so that's how I manage all my inventory through Airtable.
Okay, so speaking of cost, how much does it cost you? Because obviously you're using Zapier a lot, you're using Airtable a lot.
Sure.
How much does it cost to get all of this integration going?
Yeah, good question. Well, the software itself, I forget how much Airtable is. In fact, I don't know if you have those numbers with you. It's $25 a month, $40 a month per user, something like that. Which, when you're just doing like one or two documents, you're like, oh, that seems kind of expensive. Which that's the way I thought, and every friend that I referred to was like, really, that much a month? But once you utilize it, you realize the power of it. Like $20, $30 a month, $40 a month times 12, like I paid more. It does so much more than some of the CRMs that I pay for, and it's completely customizable and scalable, and there's so many different things that it's really, to me, not that expensive. Zapier, on the other hand, there's different packages that you can get. And again, it's something you pay for, whether it be $20 a month or $200 a month. But when you think about all of those hours that save manpower, it's cheap. Like it runs 24/7 all the time. It does the same automated things. If I was to create those tasks every day for Onfleet, that would take me, 5-10 minutes every single day instead of just like a half a second. And so you add up all of those time savings over, an annual situation, and they're really not that expensive. They're huge time savers and money savers.
Yeah. And I think you can use this all across the world. I think we have a question here from Mohammed was saying, can we do integration with Salesforce? What about in Egypt? Yeah, you can use Zapier and Airtable in Egypt. It doesn't matter. Trent's asking, what notifications do you use with your customer? Do you actually use what Onfleet's built, or do you use Airtable for notifications?
Yeah, great question. So we definitely use Airtable's text notifications. Those are fantastic. So we've got all of those set up. However, what what Onfleet doesn't do is it doesn't do the email side of things. And not every business needs emails, but in our business, we have a lot of times, people will buy something, they'll buy cupcakes. Maybe they live in New York, and their sister lives here near us, right? Well, the buyer wants to know if the delivery is happening, right? So we will send the buyer the email that's saying, that mimics what Onfleet is sending. Like, so, hey, we're out on delivery right now, and we have completed it or not. So those all go through Zapier, through our Gmail accounts. And then the Onfleet text messages go to the customer with the, we're on route, we're approaching, and we've, completed the delivery. So Zapier allows us to be able to split that communication and go to all parties instead of just the recipient.
Yeah, a lot of customers are doing that. Sometimes they're using Zapier to do a Slack notification to their team. Sometimes they're using Zapier to do a Gmail mail to your customer. So it's nice usage.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have two trucks. Why is it important that you own delivery yourself?
Yeah, good question. And actually, one other thing too to talk about that with Zapier before we jumped into that question is,
Sure.
Like we get notifications every time a new delivery comes out. It'll text message me and my other driver that handles the routes. So we know right away wherever we're at, wherever we are on the day. Our phones are obviously always connected to us. We know that we need to go back to the dispatch station to any kind of computer and get those routes updated immediately instead of, otherwise you don't really know when a new delivery comes in. So, connecting through Twilio to send us a text message is a very, very useful thing that we use every day. To your question, though, about why do we own the delivery ourselves, ultimately, learning from experience of outsourcing it, it was a disaster. Now, every business is different, right? But in our business, everything is fragile. You cannot take cupcakes and turn them sideways or shift them. Like, as soon as they're not level anymore, they'll topple over each other and ruin the whole presentation, right? And so we used to outsource this to other people, and the drivers just plain didn't care. They would just toss it in the car. They'd put it on their seats. They would stack things on top of each other. We'd be very, very clear to them of what you can and can't do, and we were spending hours upon hours every week cleaning up messes with customers and trying to get the delivery company to pay for the mistake, and they would put it on us that we didn't package it right. We're like, no, like this is terrible, right? Our customers are not having a good experience. We are not having a good experience. So we, once we transitioned away from them and we started doing it ourselves, we got to control from end to end, right? So the way that the customer interacts with us, the way that we handle errors, the way that we package things, it's now seamless from end to end, and our drivers know how to handle the product. So we have far, far less errors. In fact, really most of the errors are always caused by the customer. When we actually hand over the box, sometimes they will treat it like a football, and then next thing you know, now we've got a problem, right? So we can go end to end with it, and ultimately, we make more money doing it. To us, I don't look at it as delivery. It's not a profit center per se. Like, I'm not going to make money off my drivers. My drivers are my marketing engine, right? And not that we have banners on the sides of the van. That's minimal, right? But the fact that they can order direct from us, they can get it delivered. We have $5 flat rate delivery. And so people are super excited. They don't have to get up. It just arrives at their door. They have less hassle with getting desserts from us. No one else in our area does it like us. And so to us, it just creates this whole great experience with Patty's Cakes that make people want to buy and tell other people about us. To us, it's just plain marketing, and it makes sense to have it all in-house. Plus, we've always done wedding deliveries, so now we can do our small stuff along with our big stuff, and we can fill our schedules way more efficient than, say, just doing large deliveries.
Nice. It's great to hear from a small business like yourself that managing it from end to end really gives you an edge. So we've talked about this. You use also other tools like, for example, telematics. Do you want to explain why maybe a small company like yourself using pretty sophisticated, camera system telematics, and how that benefits you?
Yeah, totally. There's, I guess telematics is kind of a big word, but, anything that's tracking the vehicle that you can get information out of the vehicle and see it remotely. So we used to just have, dash cameras that were, from Amazon that weigh all the vehicles. So if I wanted to see something that happened in the dash cam, I'd have to wait for the driver to come back. I'd have to, put the SD card, load the videos, go through all that. There's, that timestamps and all that organization isn't the best. It works, but it's not the best. So we've used telematics because we can now grab that footage immediately from the vehicle at all times. So there's a camera in there and there is a cell card in there, right? So as things are happening, I can pull the footage. If there's an instant accident or something that triggers, it will notify me in like the timeline of the day, and so I can grab that footage without having to go through and search for things. I also have things like the telematics have been super helpful as positive reinforcement to my drivers. They know if they're speeding or braking too hard, they get a score every week. And so they can see how they're scored against braking and speeding and different metrics, right? So I don't have to tell them, hey, you suck at your braking today or this week or something, right? They just see their score tank, and then they're like, oh man, like I need to make sure I get my score up. And I can just point to the score and be like, hey, what's going on with your score? And I don't have to have more of a longer conversation than that. I can just point to that and they go and fix it, right? And then they also get a little bit of competition, right? If one driver's got a better score than the other one tends to want to improve his score, so he's not the lowest guy in the group. So telematics have been super helpful with just simply like management of our fleet.
Yeah, so that's heard it here first. Onfleet's coming out with the telematics solution and partnership. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to our partnerships team on that. But thanks for mentioning that, Philip.
Sure.
So if people want to reach you, how do they do that? So on the screen, I believe there's your LinkedIn profile as well as your email. So if they need to reach you, your email is?
Sure, you just philip@patties-cakes.com. I actually don't know if we made a screen about that, Mary, but yeah, philip@patties-cakes.com. So it's one L and then PATTYS-cakes.com. And yeah, Philip Gomez, LinkedIn. I believe you can find it. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's in the actual, it's not on my screen, but on the,
yes.
the webinar thing.
So last two questions. What do you love about Onfleet? And what would you like Onfleet to change?
Ooh, good question. I mean, out of all the software that I have, I really do enjoy Onfleet. It sets a very high bar for how fast things are. There's a lot of software out there that you're waiting for things to load, and that's like never the case with Onfleet. Everything always just, it loads. When a new delivery shows up, it's there. Things just process very quickly, which in a fast-moving, lifestyle that we're all at and trying to, get things done in an efficient manner throughout the day, it's great that Onfleet is always right there, just moving, and its uptime is always, like we've had, I think on Valentine's Day, we had like 5 minutes of downtime, but it's Valentine's Day. Like it was massively busy that day for us, and I'm sure everybody else. And, there's a little bit of a hiccup, but that's like the only hiccup we've had with them in a long time. Almost as far as I can remember. So the speed is huge. It's just easy to use. And if I can get any feedback, if routing was different colors, that would be super helpful. So that way, say like the lines that connect different routes together, maybe that's like the red driver and the blue driver. So that way, when you've got all these different routes on the screen, you can at least clearly see what driver is going which. When there's one or two drivers, it's okay. But like on Valentine's Day, when we get like 9 drivers going all out at once, like it'd be super helpful to see what's going on and who is, what driver is going where, as well as if we could say integrate those like starters or lunches that I created and maybe allow us to be a little bit more customizable in the way that tasks are assigned. That would be helpful. But other than that, like I really enjoy what we have going on here at Onfleet.
Awesome. Yeah, good news is that that's actually coming. So you've actually created starter lunch tasks, return to hub tasks. That's something that you've created. Anybody else can also do that with Zapier and with Onfleet. And then yep. I would say it is something that we're planning to build into the product. So something to look forward to and exciting. I would even say the color coding hopefully is also coming through. So lots of changes on the Onfleet side. So, and exciting to share that with everybody. But I think this was a great session, Philip. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about how you use Onfleet and all the other technologies that you integrate with. It's a very powerful way to operate your business and your delivery. Anybody, if you want to reach out to Philip, he is on LinkedIn and also by email. And if you have any questions about how to use Onfleet this way, you can contact our success team, success@onfleet.com, or your dedicated customer success manager, or you can also reach out to support@onfleet.com. We are looking forward to hearing from you and appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.